He's an Adventist pastor because Hiram, while in seminary doing evangelism, baptized his mom. And he was 14 at the time and became interested about a year later, got baptized, and now he's an Adventist pastor. Yeah, I mean, that's good stuff, right? And then Byron shared a similar story to me. He was doing a wedding I think it was in Tennessee, right? Or was it Texas? You were doing the wedding, but a guy comes up to him at the wedding and says, you don't know me, but you baptized my brother when you did evangelism in Minnesota, and he got off drugs, he got off alcohol, he cleaned up his life, and then he shared the gospel with me, and I'm an Adventist pastor because of that. And I'm like, hallelujah, right? That's just awesome. And then yesterday, a longtime ministry partner and friend by the name of Dale Cardwell comes up to me, and I didn't even remember the whole story, but he reminded me that he was the head elder when I was going to church plant in Salem, Oregon, and he came up and he says, because of the vision of the church planting and evangelistic mindset, I'm an Adventist pastor today. And I'm like, hallelujah, I could not have been more blessed yesterday than anything. I am charged up today because I believe in an evangelistic mindset and what it does, and it changes churches, it changes people, it changes everything. I thought I'd get a few more amens out of that. Amen, Raj. Okay, let's go. Okay, so when I was about 8 or 9, 10 years old, my grandpa took me on a fishing trip. And I'd never been fishing really before because he kind of focused on my older brother before that. And he says, Raj is getting old enough. Let's take him and we'll go fishing. And we went out, I think it was to DMin Lake in Oregon. And we went out and we went fishing. He had his boat and he gave me this lure, and it's called the triple teaser, okay? Brand new. He opened it up, package up, tied it on my line, and then he gives it to me, and he says, cast it out. And I go, and it gets tangled. And he untangles it really patiently. He was a great grandpa. He was the best fisherman ever. I mean, he was such a good fisherman that every time he told me a story about the fish he caught, the fish got bigger. That's how good of a fisherman he was. And so, we're trying to fish, and I'm trying to cast, and the hook would catch in my pants, and I'm just doing everything I can. But he's the greatest fisherman in the world, I thought. And I go out there, and I might finally get my line, and we're just trolling slowly with the boat. And all of a sudden, my fishing line goes, and I said, Grandpa, I got a fish. He says, well, set the hook. I said, what do you mean, set the hook? He says, go like this. And he jerks his line a little bit to show me, and I go, wham, and the fish goes flying by me because I set the hook, right? But pretty soon, we pull it out, we sticks it in a bucket of water, we bonk it on the head so it won't keep splashing around, and stuff. And then pretty soon I cast out there again, and Grandpa, I got another fish, I got a fish, He says, wind it in, and I'm winding it in. I caught 6 or 7 fish that morning, and he didn't catch anything. I was beating the master. And you know what he does? He's got the exact same lure on. That's his favorite lure. He pulls it in and looks at mine, bright, shiny, triple teaser. And then he lures his, winds his in, holds it up. His is a triple teaser also, but it's dull. So you know what he does? He does like any other grandpa would do. He cut the lines and switched the lures. And I had caught like 6 or 7 fish. When he caught like 8, he said, oh, we got to fix this because he was one up on me now. And that was on a Friday. He brings it in. He reaches back behind his seat in the boat. He pulls out some polishing compound, and he rubs and he rubs and he rubs and he rinses it in the water, and he shines it up, holds them up. You couldn't tell the difference between those 2 triple teasers after that. And we never caught another fish the rest of the weekend. It was the most amazing thing. When I was I didn't fish much until quite a few years later, and I decided I was going to take up fishing. I wanted a new hobby, so I was going to take it up, and I decided, I don't want just your standard rod and reel. I wanted to fly fish. I wanted to spend my time, standing waist deep in the water. I didn't care if I caught a fish. I just wanted to be out there throwing that line out, And man, learning to fly fish, it's dangerous. Because that fly comes right back at you, and you're like, yeah, I'll get out of the way. Well, I finally figured out how to fish. This picture reminds me, this is not me, but it reminds me of those old Verizon commercials where the guy's out fishing and his phone rings. This is back when they first started the "Can you hear me now" thing. And he's answering the phone like he's in the office, and he's holding this fishing pole under his arm, and he answers the phone and he goes back to fishing. I'm like, I don't want to answer my phone when I'm out fishing. I just want to do fish. I got so into fly fishing, I started tying flies. They weren't this good, but I could catch some fish with them, and I kind of liked it. And the only problem about fishing was that my 7-year-old son at the time, he's quite a bit older now, but when he was 7 years old, or 6 years old actually, he says, I want to go with you, Daddy. And so I take him fishing. I don't know if you've ever been fishing with a 6-year-old. It looks like this a lot. Fortunately for me, my wife likes to be with me. And she's really good at untangling knots. And so I said, hey, Gail. And she'd come running over and she'd work on Seth's line and work on, his line for a while until he got it untangled, and then I'd keep fishing. And most of the time, you study where fish are, you look where fish are, you think where they're going to be, and you follow along with them. Most of the time, I was doing catch and release. I catch the fish, and I release it. And I catch the fish, and I release it. One time, my friend took me out, though, and we caught a really big fish. Like, he was trying to teach me how to salmon fish, and we caught this, I caught this 32-inch salmon. It's not huge by salmon standards, but it was a lot bigger than the rainbow trouts I was catching, a lot bigger than the steelheads even that I was catching. I caught this, and I got this picture. I couldn't find it. I would have put it up here, but I couldn't find it. I got this picture where I'm in the kitchen, and I'm holding this fish, and my son's standing right here because he was with me. And we got the biggest smile on our face because we got this fish. And I took it to my neighbor, and I said, hey, listen, I'm a vegetarian, but I thought you might like this. He says, like it. He grabs it, and he runs off and puts it in the steaks and freezes it, and he's excited. Catching fish is a lot of fun. Most of the time I did catch and release, but we're here talking about the Propel Conference and evangelism, and I think we ought to be talking about catching and keeping. So I had a conversation years ago with Jose Cortez Jr. at the NAD, and he was up front talking to us about the statistics of evangelism and how we're keeping them. He says, we're only keeping 65% of the people. That's terrible. We should be keeping a lot more than that. And I just sat there and listened with my mouth shut because there was about 20 or 30 people in the room. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, Jose. He says, yeah. I said, do you play baseball? He says, absolutely. I said, if you got a hit 65% of the time, would you be cut from the team or would you make the Hall of Fame? He says, oh, I get your point. I said, statistically, 65, we would all like 100%, right? Yeah. Okay, I just want to see if you're still awake. Okay, we would all like 100%, but 65% is pretty good. You know what Billy Graham's percentage is? Well, it was 3%. His retention rate was 3%. Now, he got this huge auditoriums and huge stadiums, and he would fill them, and he'd get these massive decisions. 3%. Our retention rate is 65. My church here, we run closer to about 75, and here's why. I want to show you why. Because we've learned how to catch and keep, okay? This guy's dropping the ball. When my dad taught me how to play baseball, he made sure that I knew how to catch with both hands, put my mitt up, and have this hand ready to close it in. If I ever caught a ball one-handed, just stuck my mitt up and caught it like that, I was going to run laps. If I ever dropped the ball with only one hand up there, I was going to run more laps. But if I put up both hands and I'm trying to catch it, and a ball would come and I'd go like this and I'd miss it, my dad would say, nice try, Raj. Because he understood that I did my best. I think we need to learn how to catch and keep. And the basic rules of baseball is using two hands. So what do we have to do to keep what we catch? I want to show you a variation of the evangelism pyramid that you have in your booklet, okay? And this has been adapted some since I wrote my book. It's been growing as we go. The first stage of the pyramid is the relational outreach, where you're out making friends in the community. I heard a story the other day about an elderly man who was in a gym, and he was messing with his phone, and these things never work, and his Bluetooth headphones, and this guy was in his 20s. The elderly man was probably 75-ish or so, and the guy that heard him was trying to bench press, and he's like 20, 25. He said, "What? Do you need some help?" He says, "I can't get this thing to work. I never can figure out how this phone works with these headphones." And, technology goes beyond us as we age, right? So they're always discovering new things. And so he helped him, and they began a partnership, a friendship that they began working out together on a regular basis. You would never think that an elderly African-American man and a 20-something Anglo guy would become the best of friends. Called each other 3 or 4 times a week, worked out together 4 or 5 times a week, did everything they could. Friendship, relationships matter. When I was in college, my buddy and I took a trip to Southern California to see a friend. On the way back, I said, I-5's boring. Let's get off of I-5. It's just, there's nothing to see on I-5 except road and flat fields. I said, let's go up 101. Let's go see San Francisco. Let's go see the crookedest street in the world. Let's go see the Golden Gate Bridge. And we're like, okay, yeah, that's cool. We get to San Francisco. This is in the days before GPSs, and we're following maps as best as we can, but we didn't even own a map, so we'd have to stop at a gas station. I used to have maps posted on the wall. Okay, here's the road we have to take. It looks like that exit. I said, Bill, you guide me. I'll drive. We get to San Francisco. We can see the Golden Gate Bridge in a distance. We can't figure out how to get there. And we're driving in circles. We're driving around this way and that way. And finally, I just pull over. I said, Bill, roll your window down. He says, this is San Francisco. You don't talk to strangers. I said, roll your stinking window down. So he rolls his window down. I lean over and I said, can you tell us how to get on the Golden Gate Bridge? And the guy mumbles something unintelligible. We roll away real slowly. I said, what did he say, Bill? He says, I have no idea. So we stopped the next guy. Hey, how do you get to the Golden Gate Bridge? He said, you got to go back 5 blocks, take a left. I said, okay, cool. And the guy, but we get lost again on one-way streets. And I'm like, okay, we stopped and asked somebody else. And he says, yeah, you got to go forward and go to the right. I'm like, what? Nothing was making sense. We finally made the Golden Gate Bridge about 11:30 p.m. It was beautiful. You couldn't see a thing. You know what the Golden Gate Bridge is most famous for? Suicides. It's most famous for suicide. The local media has stopped publishing how many suicides happen every year or every month, because they get to 19 in a month and somebody will say, oh, I want to be the 20th. Or, hey, we've made 149 for the year. Somebody says, I want to be the 150th. One guy jumped off and committed suicide, and they found his journal in his apartment. And he had written the journal entry maybe an hour before he jumped. And here's what he wrote. If one person will say hello to me, I won't do it. Relationships are crucial to sharing the gospel. Relationships are some of the most powerful things we do. The second step of the pyramid is community service, where we are out into the community and serving in the community and helping the community, doing a cleanup at an elderly lady's house, doing a painting of a house, cleaning up a park, sweeping the road after an accident, getting glass out of the road or something, and just helping in the community. Can you imagine what it says about your church and my church if somebody says, I got a friend that goes to that church? And it's interesting because they're always out in the community serving. That says a lot, doesn't it? The third step of the pyramid is to add value-added ministry, if you will, value-added things. We used to call them bridge events, where we would bridge people to come to the church with a non-spiritual event. It's the idea of having a parenting class or a financial peace university or one church in Seattle area years ago did a diaper changing class because they found out that was the number one need in the community was how to change diapers, obviously before Pampers, okay? But they were trying to figure out how to reach their community. And what does your community need? Do they need parenting? Do they need after-school programs? Do they need a health class? Do they need cooking schools? Those are the traditional things we do where we're adding value to their life in a situation. We're not afraid to bring up Christ in one of these bridge event kinds of things, but we're not asking for a decision. We're not pushing them to make a decided decision. Can you imagine what would happen? Somebody in their mind says, I got a friend that goes to that church. And I noticed that church was always out in the community serving. And I even went to one of their parenting classes. And when I walked through the doors, the walls of the church didn't fall down. You know, it says something, right? The next one is about sharing, giving more information. I remember as a kid, I had a guy in my church whose name was Harry Ross. He owned a health food store in Portland. And he went to our church and he asked me on Sabbath afternoons, you want to go hand out Bible readings for the home? And we would take those little thick paperback books and we would put them on people's doorsteps because we were trying to share good literature with people so that they could maybe read something. It was meaningful for me because my grandma read her way into the Adventist church because of Bible readings for the home, because somebody bothered to share some literature with her that was useful and helpful and helped her understand her Bible better. And she says, I want to be part of those people. That's a fascinating story in and of itself. We won't go down that one, but I'm talking about glow tracts, I'm talking about science magazines, I'm talking about Bible studies, I'm talking about sharing the Desire of Ages, Steps to Christ, something like that with somebody. So they say, wow, I got a friend that goes to that church, and I noticed that they're always out in the community serving, and they are, I went to one of their seminars, and I've read some of their literature, and it's really good. But here's the deal. A lot of churches do all four of these things, right? I know countless number of Adventist churches and non-Adventist churches that do all four of these things. They're sharing literature, they're out serving in the community, they're doing good things, they're doing these things. But I believe that Adventist churches grow differently. And it's because of our theology. Nobody wakes up on Saturday morning unless they're a former Adventist and says, oh, gee, honey, we haven't gone to church in a while, let's go this morning. They do wake up on Sunday mornings occasionally and say that. And so Sunday morning works for people to have an outreach event at their worship service because people come and try to figure out what's going on and try to get back connected to God. We used to send out these flyers for launching churches and Easter weekend. An interesting thing about it, Sunday churches use this all the time. They mail out flyers. There's these little big postcards, and it tells about their church, their launch event. That's how Rick Warren started. That's how other people have started. They've done it for 20, 30 years. But I can't tell you a single Adventist church that's worked with. Because they look at it and they go, Saturday? Say what? I can remember when I became a Seventh-day Adventist, before I became an Adventist, we got a flyer in the mail inviting us to some evangelism, and we got an invitation inviting all the former Adventists to church. My mom and my dad both grew up Adventists. I didn't know what grace was unless I tripped on something and my dad would say, way to go, Grace. I didn't know what salvation was, the Lamb of God was. I only heard the name of Jesus in a swear word. And we got this flyer in the mail to come to a seminar. And my mom says, that's probably good. Saturday morning, she gets up, she says, Raj, get some clothes on, we're going to church. I said, Mom, don't you know the best cartoons are on today? And how come Dad gets to stay home and watch the game and I don't get to? She drags me off to church. And we started going to this seminar. My dad decided he was going to go 3 times. And then he decided ahead of time he was going to have a headache, wouldn't be able to go. My mom actually did have a headache, and so she didn't want to go. She's like, I've heard all this stuff before, and what. But my brother and I, we had never heard it. I mean, I'd been to church once in my life, and I can remember, maybe more than once or twice. I remember one time they handed out a snack, little thing of juice and a little cracker, and they wouldn't let me have any. And I'm like, who wants to be with you guys? I remember one time up on the wall, high up on the wall, these blue curtains were there. And I'm like, it looks like we're going to have a puppet show. The curtains open, and two people are standing there in funny-looking clothes, and all of a sudden one pushes the other one down and comes up wet. And then the curtains close again. I'm like, what was that? I had no idea what any of this stuff was. And my mom drags me off to church, and my brother and I, we become interested in this seminar. And all of a sudden, my dad's not going to go, and my mom's not going to go, and neither one of us drive. And we said, but we wanted to go. What do you do when your kids say they want to go to church? You go to church. It's good to do sharing and value-added and community service and relational, but at some point in time, we have to proclaim a message that Seventh-day Adventist has. Sometime we have to proclaim what that message is because we believe differently. Come on, we go to church on the wrong day, we eat the wrong food, we die differently, we go to heaven wrong. See what I'm saying? There's so much that's different about us. We have to preach that because it makes a difference, and it takes time to process Adventism. That's why I'm not a big believer in 7-day series or 10-day series, because it takes time to process some of that stuff. But when we proclaim the message, things turn around, don't they? In 2011, we did a NAD-wide pastoral evangelism was a big push, and we became the fastest growing denomination in America. USA Today said that. What did we do? We were proclaiming the message that God had given us. We have to have a point where we proclaim. That's how we catch people. That's how this church catches people. We run through this pyramid cycle twice a year in this church, most years. We say we want to constantly be making relationships in the community. My wife and I, we do it when we walk. We'll be walking along and talking to people while we stop. My kids are like, you guys are gone forever on your walk. Yeah, it's true. We walk. My wife walks me like 7-8 miles a day. It kills me, but I just keep doing it because it's our daily date and we spend time together. But we always stop and talk to people. One day we walked up to this garage sale and we walked in and the lady says, "Oh, you're the Walkers." I'm like, "Well, no, we're the Walters." "Oh, Walkers, yeah, because we walk all the way." And we're waving at people and we're building relationships. People come and say to us all the time, literally, they said, "I've watched you guys walk here for years and you wave to me every day. I had to stop and say hi." And we build a friendship. So all these things lead to the pinnacle of the pyramid where we proclaim the message. That's how we catch people. How do we keep people? Because once you get them baptized, it's a huge thing, isn't it? That bottom right picture, that's my family getting baptized and the evangelists that brought us along. It's changed everything. I think the best way to keep people is to come back down the pyramid. Proclaiming is when we worship. We worship together. They're identical things, really. We're proclaiming the message, but we have to learn to worship. If a non-Adventist came to your church and actually decided to believe and join what we believe and become a member, would they enjoy our worship services? Do you think we should spend some time making worship as good as we make evangelism? Do you think we ought to spend some time targeting who we're reaching? Maybe we could spend some time thinking through what we say. I remember years ago, after the 2015 General Conference, I had a lady stand on this stage, and her husband was on the General Conference Executive Committee at the time. And she says, "Can I give a report of the GC?" And I said, "Absolutely." So she gets to our first service, And she says, we were at the GC and we did this and they did this. And I went to her and I said, Virginia, when you do that at the next service, would you explain what you're talking about? She says, what do you mean? I said, about 20% of our audience every Sabbath are non-Adventists. Another 20% are fairly new Adventists. I said, would you just say, instead of saying the GC, would you say the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, the world governing body of the denomination? Oh, I could do that. She got up and she said a paragraph before she just said GC. But all of a sudden it made sense to everybody in the audience. When we start thinking about designing worship, what would it be like if we cleaned up our language? Because everybody has insider language, don't they? My son's in the Navy, and he's always talking about the BC-1 and the FAR-2, and I have no idea what some of these things are, but he's got, all this stuff that he talks about, and I'm like, Seth, stop. What in the world are you even talking about? And I got to ask him questions. But think about what we say. Turn in your tithes and your offerings. I got to take my tie off and put it in the offering, When I first started going to church, I see this old lady. She's getting younger all the time, by the way. But I see this old lady, because I'm getting older, right? Those people aren't old anymore. But I see this old lady, she says to another old lady, and she calls her a dork. And I'm like, what? This is church. You can't call each other dorks. What are you doing? That's so rude. And my mom says, shh. She didn't call her a dork. She invited her to Dorcas. And I'm like, oh. And then I started hearing about new Tina, and I was like, what's wrong with the old Tina? We have to clean up our language and start deciphering what we do, and what we do in worship ought to be interesting and open so that everybody understands it, don't you think? The next thing is we learn. We start, when we get people involved in evangelism and they become members, not only do we make our worship right, we also start having classes immediately afterwards. I teach a Bible marking class after every evangelistic series down in this corner, and I just take them through the Bible and I say, we're going to study the same things you learned in the prophecy seminar. We're going to do it in a different order, and we're going to allow you to ask questions all the way through. We also teach a class on the history of Adventism. We teach a class on the book of Daniel as a follow-up. We'll teach a class. We have a guy here at the church who's an expert in Bible translations. He's a former Academy Bible teacher, former pastor, and he teaches a class on the proper use of Bible translations, because I'm trying to cut off and help people learn that it's okay to use something other than the King James Bible. There's nothing wrong with the King James Bible until you start saying it's the only one. So we're trying to get people to learn and relearn the same things that they learned when they came to the seminar. The next step is we take them through and we're teaching them. We're giving them good literature. We're helping them read good stuff. When Ron Cluzet came here and did a field school, and we had like 20 seminary students here, I told him one day, I said, very few people outdo me in evangelism. I said, but you make me tired. Because he worked us for a year getting us going and making sure everything happened. And then at the end, he got people assigned as mentors for the new people. Their job is to teach them about Adventism. Their job is to help them understand Adventism. And so they would take them to the ABC and show them where the books are, show them where the different books and the different foods are, and all those things. And he says, I want you to take them these books. And he gave a shopping bag full of books. Now, Ron Cluzet has got a PhD in theology. And the books, he's a deep thinker. My people were overwhelmed with that a little bit. And the people that received them, they were supposed to give them a book a week or a book every month or something and just take them through the year. But there was like 30 books in this bag each person had. And then some people just walked up and said, hey, I want to give you these books. The average person reads less than a book a year, and you just handed them like 30 books in a bag, and they go, I can't even hold it up, right? And so the goal is that as we go up, we repeat what we do going down. And so we worship, We give them good literature to read. We're maybe even sending them to YouTube to watch certain things, but we're careful about that because we're making sure they're well-vetted videos, because there's some people who claim to be Adventists who aren't, and there's some people that shouldn't be, and they shouldn't be preaching, and they shouldn't have a following. So I say to people, be careful, because we want to teach them how to use Ellen White properly. We want to teach them how to use the Bible properly. The next step is we get them involved. It's the same as community service, but we're getting them involved in church. We're making them ushers. We're making them greeters at the door. I'm not going to make a new person an elder or a deacon, but I am going to get them involved helping pick up the offering. I know the church manual probably says you shouldn't do that, but honestly, if they can do something that they feel totally involved in, maybe it's just counting attendance. Maybe it's cleaning up after an event. Maybe it's setting up tables and chairs for the potluck. Maybe it's doing some of those kinds of things. Just to get involved, I'm going to get them involved going back out and doing community service. I'm going to get them involved doing some other things, because when they're involved, it changes things. I had a guy tell me one time when I was church planting in Colorado, he says, "Nobody comes after evangelism, Raj. Nobody comes." I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He says, and he names an evangelist by the name of Dan Bensiger, who had been there about 6 years before. He says, "Nobody's even coming from that." I said, "How about so-and-so? How about Shane and Amy? How about John? How about Bob? How about Sue?" And I named like 10 people just like that. He says, "They all came from that seminar?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I am in shock. I thought nobody was still here." I said, "Name the seminar that we've done," and we did 2 a year in Colorado. And I said, "Name the seminar and I'll tell you how many people are here still." And that started me on a journey where I started keeping track in a spreadsheet, and I can show you my baptismal numbers, my retention rate by name since the year 2000. Because I understood that what happened, all of a sudden I realized that new people get involved, and we had been getting them involved and making sure that they were part of what was happening. And as new people get involved, the church members begin to go, subconsciously, they're just thinking, we could never have done this without them. So they must have been here all the time. We got to get people involved. We got to help them to see the need. And listen, any of you pastor in a church, do you have too many people involved? The next step of the pyramid, the last one, is building relationships. And it is this concept of helping people build friends. Hiram mentioned 2. I've always heard that you need at least 7 friends within the first year or you're not staying. The average Adventist doesn't have any friendships outside of church after about 5 years. We need to make sure they have friends, because if they don't have friends, they're not staying. I mean, we'd like to think they stay because of our theology, but what really happens is that they come because of our theology. They stay because they've made a friend. And they feel involved, and they feel a part of what is happening. It's fascinating when you stop and think about all that happens in the world. But without 7 close personal friends, people are going to be gone. I can remember when we became Seventh-day Adventists. I showed you the baptismal picture. Baptized over in Cherry Creek, Oregon. We had some people in the church that made friends with us. Names are Sharon and Leroy Kelm. They had a couple of daughters that were my brothers of my age. Maybe they had ulterior motives, but we were a little young for that, okay? At least I was, and the daughter that was my age was. But it didn't matter. We did things together on Saturday night. We sat next to them in church. We went out on Thursday night and went out to eat with them. And they made friends with us, and they introduced us to things. She would hand books to my mom. They would talk on the phone. And a year after we were baptized, there was about 20 people baptized in that evangelistic series. I think my family was the only ones left because we had some friends. And we had some close friends. So, how do we keep people? I think you got to catch them through the left side of the pyramid. I think you keep them on the right side of the pyramid. It's the same steps, over and over, repeated over and over, so that we can catch and keep. I've never caught a fish that big. I think it'd be a fun thing to do. But I think back to that fish that we caught, and I can remember giving it to my friend and a huge smile on his face. He just lived about 3 or 4 doors down from me. I remember just about a year ago, a guy came down from Alaska who used to be a member of this church. He moved down, he was just visiting from Alaska. He says, "Hey, I brought you some fresh Alaskan halibut." I'm like, I'm vegetarian and mostly vegan, okay? Except when it's inconvenient. No, but I'm mostly vegan, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to eat that fish. And so, you know what I did to him? I said, "I don't want your stinking fish." No, I didn't say that to him. I said, "Great." So he brings me these 3 steaks of halibut, looking like that. 3 of them. Big steaks, frozen. And you know what I did? I took one to my next door neighbor. And the guy's eyes go like, "Whoa, fresh halibut, that's awesome." And I take the other 2 to another neighbor who had a bigger family, and he'd help me out with something. And I said, "Hey, I just wanted to say thanks. And I thought I'd give you this." He said, "We're having that tonight." So, if we're talking about catching and keeping, Jesse Wilson talked the other night about losing his son for 20 minutes. Most people don't care that you lose your kids. I was at a farm store in Battleground, just about 15 minutes from here, with 2 of my kids. 3 of them, actually. The oldest was about 12 at the time. The youngest was about 4, and he was staying with me. And my 8-year-old, she got misplaced from us. Guess why? She's following me around. I got a hat on, I got a t-shirt on, I got a pair of shorts, and I got a pair of sandals. I go up one aisle, go down the next aisle. I'm looking for something specific for our dogs or whatever, and I'm looking for something. And all of a sudden I look around, and my daughter Cosette is gone. I'm like, "Where'd she go?" And I said to my 9-year-old, "Go that way and look up every aisle. I'll go this way." We looked up every aisle. She was completely gone. And guess what? I go by the cash register. It's so shocking to me. I said, I think somebody took my daughter. And they look at me and start ringing up the next item. I'm like, "Hello, lock the doors, shut the house down, call the cops, do something. Don't just go on with life," right? Well, a guy that was dressed with a hat and a t-shirt and a pair of shorts and a pair of sandals walks back in. He says, "This little girl just followed me. I didn't take her, honestly. I just gave her this huge hug. She just was following along and saw a guy with shorts. She thought it was her daddy. She should have known his legs were bigger than mine." But nobody else cared. I loved what Jesse Wilson said the other night when he says, if you can never forget the heart of losing your kid, we can go forward together. We can continue to reach people. I just believe that the purpose of the church is to catch people and to keep people. I think heaven is big enough that we need to catch more. Do you know the average Adventist pastor only sees about 100 to 150 baptisms in their career? That's horrifying to me. I've been fortunate enough to see almost 1,000. And I'm just like, we've got to do something to keep people, to grow them, to help them put roots down. And when I heard those 3 stories yesterday about people who, because somebody shared their faith, came back around and became an Adventist pastor and helping other people come to Jesus, I'm like, that's the good news at work. That's when we're catching and we're keeping, and we got to go fish, don't we? To be a fisher of men, to share our faith. I want you to, if you got a Bible on your phone, take a look. John chapter 5, verse 1 to 11. Here's what it says. This is from the New Living Translation. One day as Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, great crowds pressed in on him to listen to the word of God. And he noticed 2 empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. Stepping into one of the boats, Jesus asked Simon, its owner, to push out into the water, so he sat in a boat and taught the crowds from there. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Now go out where it's deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish." "Master," Simon replied, "we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing, but you say so, I'll let the nets down again." Can you just see Peter doing this? Oh, come on, Jesus. We've been going all night long. My arms are toast. I have nothing left. And he's making up all this story, and at the same time looking into Jesus' eyes, and he's going, "Can you? Okay, if you say so. Then I'm going to have to clean the nets again." This time their nets were so full of fish that they began to tear. A shout for help from the partners of the other boat, and soon both boats were filled with fish and on the verge of sinking. When Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, "Oh Lord, please leave me. I'm such a sinful man." For he was awestruck by the catch of fish, as were the others with him. His partners, James, John, and sons of Zebedee, were also amazed. Jesus replied to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people." And as soon as they landed, they left everything to follow Jesus. Years ago, Greeley, Colorado, we invited this evangelist by the name of Dan Bensinger again to come. The only place we could find to rent was the Civic Auditorium. It sat 850 people on the main floor. And Dan said to me over the phone, he says, the amount of brochures we're sending out means you're going to get a crowd of about 300 people there. He says, I'm a little concerned it will get lost with the crowd dynamics. It will lose people in the space. I said, there's no place else to go. So we rented the building. And we started praying. And we started moving forward in prayer because we knew something significant had to happen. We knew, we were church planting and we had a deadline, and we had been given a deadline from the conference that if we are not up to speed financially and in attendance within 3 years, I'm going to be given a second or third church. And so my church didn't want that. I didn't want that. And so we began to pray like mad. And at a leadership meeting, when we decided to do it, I said, let's bet the farm on doing evangelism. We've done so much stuff buying equipment for ourselves. We were a contemporary church, and we were doing stuff as much as we could to make things go forward. And it wasn't, we'd grown to about 100, and we'd stalled out for like 2.5 years. I said, let's bet the farm on reaching lost people. And my board said, yes, let's do it. And we had $70,000 in the bank. We invited Dan in, and we did this evangelistic series. We've mailed to 100,000 plus homes, and we rented this facility. And it was amazing because opening night, we were standing around and we didn't know if anybody was going to come or not. And almost 800 people showed up. We thought we were going to have to open the second layer of the Civic Center. It was amazing. And when we stood around doing the baptisms, where we baptized over 50 people, and we sat there, and we had another church helping us, and we were baptizing, the other pastor and I, we were baptizing people. One of my members says to me, what's going on, Raj? I said, what do you mean? He says, this kind of stuff happens in Africa, not in America. What's going on? I remember when I moved here 15 years ago, and we decided to do an evangelistic series. We invited Richard Halverson to come in, Ron Halverson's little brother. We invited him to come in, and my church member says, we do a lot of evangelism, but we don't get a lot of results out of it. And opening night, my head greeter was standing out in the lobby, her jaws hanging down like this. And she says, I don't understand it. We do a lot of evangelism, But we've never had a response like this. I said, I'm glad this church is evangelistic. I'm glad they want to do it. My job as the new lead pastor is to show you how to do it right. What would happen if we would go back to our churches, to other conferences and around North America, and people started catching fire with what we were being lit with this week? What would happen if people said, wow, what happened to those guys that went to Propel? They're going off the charts in growth. What would happen if they saw what was happening and all of us together, we got together every year right here? Well, okay, Tacoma. But what if we got together every year and sharpened each other and helped each other and spread the word? Because part of that is going out of here and saying, next year you got to come too. What would happen if a fire got started? When I moved to Colorado, I asked my ministerial director if I could get some money for an evangelistic series. And he says, sure. How much do you want? I said, I want $10,000. He passed out right in front of me. He says, we don't give that kind of money. I said, what do you normally give? He says, we'll give you $2,000. I said, that's not going to cut it. That it will not work. You cannot gather a crowd with $2,000. And he finally submitted and he gave me $8,000. When I left Rocky Mountain Conference, we were getting $60,000 a year from the conference, and we were spending over $100,000 on evangelism every year because it's that important. But here's the bigger deal. When I got to Rocky Mountain Conference, nobody was doing evangelism. It doesn't work, right? But when they saw it start to work at this contemporary church plant and doing traditional evangelism with an amazing facts evangelist of all things, and how's that working? All of a sudden, a whole bunch of people started doing evangelism. And all of a sudden, the largest church in the conference hired an associate pastor who had been an evangelist his whole career to come on staff just to do evangelism. I want to see the Seventh-day Adventist Church in North America sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ as Adventists understand it. And I want to see it spread like fire to other churches. So when you go back to Texas, when you go back to Idaho, when you go back to North Carolina, wherever you go, that people say, something's going on there. We got to go and learn from them. Because what would it be like if we could share the message that God has given us wide and far? I think it's time to go fishing. Don't you? Pray with me. Father God, please come into our hearts. I pray that we will not go out of here, Lord, and take our booklet and stick it on a shelf beside all our other conference booklets and notebooks. We will use the information that we have gathered and we will begin to apply it to help our churches to catch a vision for the gospel, sharing it with other people, to share the message of Adventism in Jesus Christ. I thank you, Lord, for the grace that has been patient with me. I thank you for the grace that has changed each of us. Please let this be a fire that spreads rapidly. Amen.